My name is Rachel Dorsey. I'm 33, and this Christmas, my aunt pointed at me across the dinner table and said I was the reason my mother left. I hadn't even taken off my coat yet. The smell of ham, pine needles, and cinnamon candles hit me all at once, along with the sound of forks pausing mid-bite and a silence that felt like a slap. I drove 6 hours for this. Have you ever walked into a room full of family and felt like a stranger, or worse, a threat? Drop a comment if you've ever been blamed for something that broke your family. Because what happened next changed the way I saw everything I thought I knew about my mother, my aunt, and the story I'd been told for half my life. Let me take you back to the moment I walked through that front door, arms full of gifts, heart full of hope, and straight into a minefield. I don't know what I expected when I opened that door, maybe polite awkwardness, maybe even a few smiles. But not that. Not Aunt Marlene's perfectly manicured finger slicing the air between us like a blade. Not her voice, sharp as tinsel wire, cutting across the room. She's the reason her mother walked out. Let's not pretend. I froze. My boots still wet from the porch. One hand gripping a stack of carefully wrapped gifts. The other balancing a foil-covered pie dish that suddenly felt heavier than it had an hour ago. No one said anything. No one told her to stop. Not even my dad. For a moment, the room was a Norman Rockwell painting dipped in acid cranberry sauce gleaming on bone-white plates, silverware halfway to mouths. The hum of a Christmas playlist still trickling in from the kitchen speakers. Everything cheerful, except the eyes now locked on me. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My voice folded in on itself, like it knew better. Aunt Marlene didn't blink. She just sipped her wine and looked away like the matter was settled. I set the pie on the nearest table beside her porcelain angel centerpiece and walked in, placing each gift beneath the tree one by one. For my cousins, books they'd posted about online. For Uncle Howard, a framed photo I'd restored of him and Dad in high school. For Dad, a mug with his Army unit's insignia, and a card he probably wouldn't read. None for Marlene. That wasn't a snub. I just hadn't thought she'd want one. I could feel the stares follow me, some pitying, some confused, some like Emma's embarrassed but passive. Justin caught my eye, half rose from his seat, then sat back down. No one asked me to stay. No one said, "Don't listen to her." No one said, "She's wrong." I cleared my throat, managing a brittle, "Merry Christmas," and made my way to the hallway. Behind me, conversations slowly resumed in fragments, clumsy, patchy, like a radio trying to find a signal. The hallway was dark, except for the glow from a ceramic village on the console tabletony. Fake snow blanketing, tiny fake lives that looked so much more peaceful than mine. I shut the bathroom door behind me and finally let out a breath. The mirror was cruel. My lipstick was smudged. My eyes were already rimmed red. I blinked hard. That moment kept playing in my head, over and over, like a film strip someone refused to rewind. Her words. My silence. The silence of everyone else. Was I the reason? That night all those years ago. The shouting, the slammed door, my mother disappearing with nothing but a purse and a coat. I had yelled something awful. I couldn't even remember what exactly, but I'd meant it at the time. I was 17. Angry. Tired of the fights. Tired of being told I wasn't grateful when all I wanted was answers. And then she was gone. And no one ever explained why. My dad wouldn't talk about it. Marlene had stepped in with casseroles and suggestions. And I had left, too physically at 18, emotionally long before that. Until now. This trip was supposed to be a kind of peace offering. I had spent days choosing gifts, baking the pie with my roommate Tony's recipe, even bringing my old sketchbook in my bag just in case I felt brave enough to share it. A symbol, I guess, of the parts of me they never really wanted. But the moment I stepped into that house, it felt like none of it mattered. Like nothing I'd done had earned me a seat at the table. I looked down at the necklace I wore, simple silver, a charm my mom gave me on my 16th birthday. I touched it now, the way I used to as a kid when I was nervous. A reflex I thought I'd outgrown. A soft knock on the bathroom door. I flinched. Then a voice. Emma's. Hey, you okay? I didn't answer. Not because I was mad at her, but because I didn't know how to explain that this wasn't just about one comment. It was about being erased in slow motion for years and watching everyone let it happen. The faucet dripped once. Then again. The ceramic angel in the dining room probably hadn't moved, but the balance of things had. I stared at myself a moment longer. Then whispered, maybe she's right. And I hated how much of me believed it. I stayed in that bathroom longer than I probably should have. The tile was cold, the faucet dripped every few seconds, and the overhead light buzzed like it was straining to keep up. But it was quiet. Quieter than the dinner table. Quieter than the storm inside my chest. I kept staring at myself like the mirror might explain something. Like maybe my reflection could tell me whether I really was the reason my mom left. Whether I'd always known. I touched the charm on my necklace again. The silver had dulled over the years, but the shape of its two interlocking circles was still sharp under my fingertips. She gave it to me on my 16th birthday, a month before she disappeared. I swallowed hard. What had I said to her that night? Something cruel, I know that much. We were standing in the kitchen, me with my car keys, her with a damp dish rag, both of us exhausted from months of arguing over things that seemed so small now. Clothes. College. Friends. The way she'd started crying during commercials and locking herself in the bedroom for hours at a time. I had thrown something down, probably my phone. I was 17 and dramatic. She'd asked me why I couldn't just be normal, and I think I screamed back. If you hate being here so much, why don't you just leave? And then she did. I never knew if that was the moment, or if it had nothing to do with me at all. But no one explained it. No note, no warning, just gone. And then the silence. I remember my dad handing me toast the next morning like nothing had happened. Eat, he'd said. You have school. I remember going through that day like a fogged-up version of myself. Pretending not to notice that her keys were gone. Her purse was missing. Her closet half empty. I asked him once, only once. Did she say where she was going? And he said, she needs some space. But the space just kept getting bigger. And no one ever filled it in. Instead, Marlene stepped in. Cooked dinner twice a week. Drove me to my senior year awards ceremony. Took down the family photo from the hallway and replaced it with one of me, Dad, and her at graduation. Said, you've got to keep moving forward, that's what your mom would want. But she never said it like she believed it. She said it like she'd already rewritten the ending of the story and just needed me to accept my part in it. I backed away from the mirror and sat on the closed toilet lid, my hands gripping the edge of the sink. What bothered me most wasn't just what Marlene said at the dinner table. It was that no one looked surprised. Like the idea that I might be to blame had been floating around long enough that no one felt the need to challenge it. Like they'd all agreed at some point that silence was more comfortable than asking hard questions. I pressed my palms to my eyes until the world turned red and black and swirling. What if she had left because of me? What if I pushed too hard, asked too much, said the wrong thing too many times? Or worse, what if she left because she didn't know how to stay? A memory hit me then. Not a big one, just a quiet Tuesday afternoon from years ago. I was maybe 10. My mom was folding laundry, and I was sitting on the floor coloring. She held up one of Dad's shirts and stared at it for a while before folding it. Then she said softly, like to herself, some people stay because they don't know how to leave. And some leave because they don't know how to stay. At the time, I thought she was talking about a soap opera. Now I wasn't so sure. I stood slowly and turned off the faucet. The dripping stopped, but the noise inside me didn't. It rattled like wind through a broken window. There was a light knock at the door again. This time it was Dad's voice. Ray? I froze. He hadn't called me that in years. Yeah? I managed. You all right? Fine, I'll lead. A pause. We're about to cut the pie. Thought you might want a slice. I stared at the sink. I'll be out in a minute. Another pause. Then. Okay. His footsteps creaked away down the hall. I looked at myself one more time in the mirror. My eyes were puffy. My lip had a small bite mark where I'd been chewing on it without realizing. I took a breath, but it didn't go all the way in. On the back of the door was one of those decorative towels people hang but never use. Embroidered in gold thread were the words, "Bless this home." I reached out and touched it, just to see if it was real. It was. But it didn't feel like it belonged here. Not anymore. When I finally stepped out of the bathroom, the hallway felt quieter than before. Not silent, just carefully managed. From the dining room, I heard silverware clinking and someone laughing a little too loudly, like they were trying to patch over something broken. I straightened my sweater and walked slowly toward the living room. Every step felt like I was interrupting something, even though I'd been invited. The lights on the Christmas tree blinked in a slow, hypnotic pattern, gold and white and too perfect. Not a single ornament out of place. I could smell cinnamon, cloves, and a hint of artificial pine. Everything felt designed to be cozy. But it wasn't. It was like stepping onto a movie set where the script didn't include me. Emma saw me first. She put down her wine glass and stood, smoothing her dress like it gave her something to do. "Hey," she said softly, walking toward me. I braced for a question. Or an apology. Or something real. Instead, she offered me a half smile and asked, "Want a drink?" He hesitated. "Sure." We walked into the kitchen, side by side but not really together. The overhead lights were dimmer in here, which I appreciated. It gave me permission not to look too closely at her. She handed me a glass of wine and said, "I didn't know she was going to say that. Aunt Marlene, I mean." Her voice was light. Careful. Like someone navigating a minefield barefoot. I nodded, swirling the wine without drinking it. "Okay." Emma bit her lip. She has strong opinions, you know. And with the holidays and everything, sometimes emotions get... "Do you think I made her leave?" I asked, not blinking. Emma blinked instead. She opened her mouth, then closed it. "That's not what I think," she said finally. "But it's what people have said. For a long time." There it was. Not a dagger, more like a pin pushed under the skin. I wanted to ask who people were. But I already knew. Emma looked like she wanted to change the subject, and I let her. I didn't have the energy to chase truth from someone who wasn't ready to give it. We walked back into the living room. Uncle Howard was balancing a plate of pie and a tumbler of whiskey. When he saw me, he smiled too big and too fast. "Well, look who finally rejoined us," he said, like I'd just come back from the bathroom at a bar. "You know," he added, "takes a lot of guts to show up after all these years. We're all proud of you." He patted my shoulder, then walked off before I could ask what, exactly, they were proud of. I took a sip of the wine. It was cheap and overly sweet, like Marlene had picked it for the label, not the flavor. The kind that says, "Harvest Blessings" or "Peaceful Valley," but burns on the way down. I sat on the edge of the couch. The fabric was stiff, probably never used outside of holidays. My gift for Emma was under the tree, wrapped in matte paper with a silver ribbon. It suddenly looked ridiculous. Just then, someone tapped me lightly on the shoulder. It was Mrs. Ellerby, Marlene's neighbor from 2 houses down. She'd always worn too much perfume and remembered everyone's birthdays. "Rachel, it's so good to see you," she said with that high-pitched cheerfulness that made you feel like a small child. "Hi, Mrs. Ellerby." She leaned in a little. "I thought you'd moved to Portland." I blinked. "I've never been to Portland." She laughed. "Oh, well, maybe I misunderstood. Marlene said you were out west now, starting some new life. A designer or something?" I looked at her for a second too long, then smiled. "Something like that." "Oh." She nodded and wandered off toward the buffet table. My hands felt cold even though the room was warm. Portland? What else had Marlene been saying? I glanced toward the dining room. Marlene was there, laughing with 2 of the churchwomen, holding a glass of wine like a queen entertaining loyal subjects. She caught my eye for half a second and smiled like nothing had ever happened. And I smiled back. I don't know why. Maybe because I wasn't ready to explode. Maybe because I'd learned from her that smiling is sometimes just another kind of armor. I turned back toward the tree. My reflection caught in one of the silver ornaments. Warped, small, distorted. Just then, Justin walked by and gave me a subtle nod. Not quite support, but not indifference either. I nodded back. It wasn't much. But in that moment, it was enough to remind me I hadn't imagined all of it. That something real had happened. That I wasn't crazy. I looked around that room at the curated decorations, the tight, polite smiles, the stories that had been trimmed and shaped like holiday centerpieces, and I made a quiet promise to myself. I wasn't going to let someone else tell my story anymore, even if they'd already been telling it for years. I stayed near the tree longer than I needed to, mostly because I didn't know where else to go. The living room was crowded but strangely impersonal, like being at someone else's wedding where you vaguely know the bride. People milled around with slices of pie and plastic forks, avoiding eye contact like they didn't want to catch a stray emotion. I stood up and walked toward the dining room, toward the kitchen. Dad was there, leaning against the counter with a slice of pecan pie balanced on a paper plate, eating in quiet, measured bites. His posture hadn't changed since I was a kid, always slightly hunched, as if waiting for the next hard thing. He saw me and gave a small nod. "You want some pie?" he asked, like nothing had happened, like I hadn't just been accused of emotionally detonating the family 20 minutes ago. I nodded. "Sure." He cut a slice, slid it onto a plate, and handed it to me with a fork. Still no eye contact. Still no mention of Marlene. Or Mom. Or the years between us. Just pie. I sat beside him on a bar stool. We ate in silence for a while. The kind of silence that starts to ache if it goes on too long. Finally, I said, "You remember when she left, right?" He didn't look up, but his fork paused midair. "I remember a lot of things," he said. That wasn't an answer, it was offense. "I was just wondering," I continued, "if she ever said anything to you before she left. Anything I didn't know." He set his fork down and wiped his hands on a paper napkin. Still not looking at me. "She packed a bag a couple of weeks before," he said quietly. "I found it in the closet, under a blanket." That stopped me. "I didn't know that," I said. "I didn't think you needed to," he replied. I felt a sting in the back of my throat. Not from anger, from loss. Because that bag changed everything. It meant she'd been thinking about leaving. Planning it. It wasn't a heat-of-the-moment thing. It wasn't about the fight. It wasn't just me. "She left a letter," he added after a pause. My stomach dropped. "What?" He exhaled through his nose, slow and heavy. "She wrote a letter, said it was for you." I turned toward him fully now. "Where is it?" "She gave it to Marlene," he said. "Told her to hold on to it. Marlene told me later she didn't think you needed to see it. Said it'd just mess you up more." My hands went cold. "She decided that for me?" I asked. "She said your mom wasn't well. That the letter might confuse things." I stared at him. "And you believed her?" "I didn't want to make things worse," he muttered. There it was. The family motto. Don't make it worse. Don't ask. Don't dig. Don't feel too much. Don't need too much. Just move on. Smile through it. Swallow it whole. "I was 17, I said. "She left. And I thought I was the reason, and you let me believe that." He looked down. For a moment, I thought he might say something honest. But instead, he picked up his fork again. "You've got your life now. You're doing good things, helping people." "That's not the point," I said quietly. He didn't respond. We sat in silence again, but this time it wasn't quiet. It buzzed. It scraped at my skin. A war story came to mind, something he'd once told me in passing, years ago. About how in basic training, they made you sleep in freezing tents and strip your rifle down blindfolded. How silence was sometimes considered a survival tactic. A strategy. How talking too much could get people hurt. I used to think he was brave. Now I wasn't so sure. Maybe silence had saved him once, but in our family, it had left wounds no one ever tended. I set the plate down on the counter, the pie barely touched. "I think I'm gonna get some air," I said. He didn't try to stop me. Just said, "There's a jacket in the hall closet if you didn't bring one." I nodded and walked out, my chest tight. In the hallway, I passed the photo of Grandma Dorsey in her church dress, framed like royalty. And just beneath it, a Christmas wreath hung with wooden letters that spelled peace. The irony was laughable. I opened the front door. Cold air hit me hard, but it felt good. Honest. I stood on the porch and breathed, really breathed, for the first time that night. Somewhere behind me, inside that house, was a letter with my name on it. And someone had decided I didn't deserve to read it. The cold outside helped. It cut through everything: shame, confusion, rage, and left just the bare bones of what I knew. There was a letter. And someone had kept it from me. I stood on the porch another minute or two, pretending to watch the wind shake the wreath on the neighbor's porch, pretending I didn't hear Marlene's laugh through the walls. But I wasn't pretending on the inside anymore. I was done pretending. I walked back inside through the side door. No one noticed. Or if they did, they didn't say anything. The kitchen was empty again, half a pie still on the counter, a tray of cookies untouched. I took a deep breath, moved quietly down the hallway, and slipped into the laundry room. That's where she used to keep things. Not the important things, just the things she didn't want anyone to touch. I remembered that much. I opened the pantry. Cleaning supplies. Old light bulbs. A bag of birdseed that looked like it had been there since 2005. Nothing. Then I opened the freezer. Frost rushed out like breath held too long. Frozen lasagna. A turkey neck in a Ziploc. A bag of peas that looked like it had been thawed and refrozen more than once. Behind it all, tucked in the back corner like it was trying to disappear, was a metal recipe box. The second I saw it, something in my chest shifted. It wasn't just that it was old, it was familiar. Beige with rust along the edges, the clasp held shut with a rubber band. I remembered it used to sit on the counter when I was little. Mom wrote all her recipes on 3x5 cards with little drawings in the corner: cherries, stars, the occasional snowflake for winter pies. I pulled it out slowly and set it on top of the dryer. My hands shook. I opened it. The first thing inside wasn't a recipe. It was a folded note with my name on it. Not my mom's handwriting. It was Marlene's. I knew because she always wrote her lowercase e like a backward 3. The note read, "Rachel doesn't need this right now. Trust me, it'll only hurt her." I stared at it. My vision started to pulse. Under the note were envelopes. One of them yellowed, sealed, and soft around the edges like it had been touched too many times but never opened. My name was written on the front. In soft, cursive. My mother's handwriting. I sat down on the edge of the dryer and held the letter in my lap. I didn't open it. Not yet. My hands weren't ready. There was a faint smell to it: paper, lavender, and something I couldn't place. Maybe dust. Maybe time. I looked back down at Marlene's note. Rachel doesn't need this right now. What gave her the right to decide what I needed? What gave her the right to hold back the only explanation, the only goodbye I might ever get? My jaw tightened. I folded the fake note in half, then again, and shoved it into my coat pocket. The real letter, though, I held onto that like it was glass. I didn't even want to breathe too hard. 1,000 thoughts spun through me. What if it said she hated me? What if it didn't explain anything at all? What if I'd been waiting all these years for words that wouldn't fix anything? I pressed the envelope to my chest. It was real. After all these years, it was real. I stood up slowly, careful not to bend the corners. The recipe box snapped shut, echoing too loud in the small room. I held the envelope tight and peeked through the doorway. The hallway was clear. I moved past the family photos on the wall: me and Dad at my 8th grade graduation, one of Marlene and Uncle Howard at some church picnic, and into the guest bedroom, the one I'd been told to sleep in tonight. I locked the door behind me. The bed was covered in a floral comforter that looked like it had never been slept under. On the nightstand was a stack of seasonal devotionals and a lavender-scented lotion that was at least 3 Christmases old. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the envelope again. I didn't open it. Not yet. Not because I didn't want to know, but because I needed to believe, for one more minute, that the truth inside it might change something. Might help me remember who my mother really was. Not who Marlene told me she was. Not who the silence made her into. But the woman who made cranberry cake from scratch and let me paint her nails on Sunday afternoons. Who hummed Patsy Cline while folding laundry. Who taught me how to draw stars with 5 perfect lines. That woman had written me something. And I was finally holding it. The envelope was still in my hand when I stepped out onto the porch again. This time, I didn't feel the cold. Dad was out there, leaning against the railing with a cigarette burning low between his fingers. The porch light above us buzzed faintly, casting that yellowish glow that made everything look older, softer, a little more worn out than it actually was. He didn't turn when he heard the door open. Just flicked some ash into the air and kept staring out at the yard like it had answers he couldn't find. I found it, I said. My voice wasn't angry. It wasn't anything, really just tired. He turned his head a little, enough to see me from the corner of his eye. Then he looked down at the envelope in my hand. His shoulders sank just slightly, like something inside him finally gave up pretending. You read it? He asked. Not yet, I said. He nodded, slow. I figured it might still be in the house somewhere. You didn't think to look for it yourself? I asked. A long pause. I did, he said. Couple times. But Marlene always said it wasn't a good idea. That it'd do more harm than good. I walked to the railing and stood beside him. Not too close. She said Mom wasn't well, I said, and that the letter might confuse me. Yeah. Did you believe that? He looked at me then. Not fully, just enough to make eye contact hurt a little. I wanted to, he said. There it was. I didn't know what to do after she left, he went on. I was still working swing shifts. You were finishing school. And Marlene. She stepped in. Said she'd handle things. I exhaled hard through my nose. She sure did. He flinched, barely, and looked down at the porch floor. She always had a way of making things sound like they were for the best, and I didn't fight her, I should've. I know that. You think? I snapped. The words came out sharper than I meant, but I didn't pull them back. He nodded, but didn't speak. I stared out into the dark. The porch light buzzed again. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked once, then went quiet. You let me believe it was my fault, I said quietly. You let her tell people that. His jaw tensed. I didn't know she was saying it like that, he said. Not for sure, but I heard pieces over the years, never enough to pin it down. Aller. That didn't stop her from pinning it to me. He closed his eyes for a second. Took a long drag off the cigarette and let the smoke trail out into the cold air. I'm not good at this, he said. I noticed. Another long silence. I was raised to keep things quiet, he added. You don't talk about feelings, you just get through. You push forward. I was 17, I said. You could have told me the truth. I didn't know how, he said. And by the time I thought maybe I should, it felt too late. Felt like opening that door would only make things worse. There it was again. Making things worse. I wanted to scream. Instead, I just shook my head. You ever think maybe the silence was the worst part? I asked. He didn't answer. I looked down at the envelope in my hand. The edges had started to curl slightly from my grip. She wrote this for me. And you let someone else decide I didn't deserve it. He nodded. Yeah. No excuses. Just a quiet admission that he'd failed me. It didn't make it okay. But it made it real. And maybe that was something. I leaned against the railing beside him and stared at the gravel driveway, slick with frost. I haven't opened it because I'm scared, I said. He glanced at me. Of what? That it won't change anything. His mouth pressed into a line. Maybe it won't, but it's hers. That counts for something. I swallowed hard. He looked down at the cigarette in his hand like he'd just remembered it was there, then dropped it into the ashtray beside the rocking chair. He turned to go back inside, then paused with his hand on the door. "I'm sorry, Ray," he said. "I should have fought harder." Then he disappeared into the house. I stood alone on the porch, envelope in hand, porch light buzzing above me like a slow, steady heartbeat. I wasn't ready to open the letter. But I was getting closer. The envelope was no longer in my hand. It was in my coat pocket, tucked between an old tube of lip balm and the note Marlene wrote to keep it hidden. The paper felt warmer now, like it had absorbed my heartbeat. I stood in the hallway just long enough to hear laughter ripple through the dining room again. Forks on china, glasses clinking. A second round of dessert, maybe. It didn't feel like a holiday anymore. It felt like a performance. And I was done clapping for it. I walked toward the dining room with a calm I didn't expect. Not numbness, not rage, just stillness. Like I'd finally stepped into my own story. They were all there. The table stretched long and wide-lace runner down the center, candles glowing at even intervals, Marlene's ceramic angels still standing guard over the centerpiece. Marlene saw me first. She was laughing at something Uncle Howard said, fork in hand, when her eyes landed on mine. Her smile didn't even falter. "There you are," she said. "We were just saying you missed the second round of pie." I looked around the table, faces turned toward me. Some curious, some guarded. Emma looked nervous. "I'd like to say something," I said. It wasn't loud, but it didn't have to be. The room quieted in a breath. Marlene set her fork down. "Now might not be the best time, honey. We're just about to." "It is," I said. "It's the only time." A flicker of something passed through her eyes. Not fear, not yet. Just annoyance dressed as concern. I took the folded letter out of my pocket. I didn't wave it or hold it up like a prop. I just looked at it for a second before speaking again. "This is a letter my mom wrote me the night she left. Murmurs. I found it in the house. Hidden. With a note from Marlene saying I didn't need to see it." More murmurs now. A rustle of chairs. Aunt Barb shifted in her seat. Emma's eyes went wide. Marlene's voice stayed smooth. "Rachel, I understand this is emotional, but this isn't the place." "It's exactly the place," I said. "Because this is where it happened. This table, this house, this family." No one moved. I unfolded the letter slowly. My hands were steady. I'm not going to read the whole thing, just one part. I found the paragraph. The one that caught in my throat when I read it earlier, sitting on the edge of the bed with the door locked and my whole world rearranging itself. I read. "If you're reading this, it means you've finally found what they tried to keep from you. I didn't leave you, Rachel. I left the version of myself they expected me to be. I left the quiet, the pretending. I left before I disappeared altogether." I looked up. The room was still. Emma blinked fast. Her little sister Kayla stared at me like I'd spoken a different language. Marlene folded her hands in front of her like she was posing for a Christmas card. "Well," she said, voice clipped. "I think we've all had enough drama for one evening." No one laughed. "I know what you've been saying about me," I said. "For years. That I pushed her away, that I broke this family." I looked around the table again. At Howard. At Emma. At the neighbor who thought I'd moved to Portland. "I didn't break anything," I said. "I just finally stopped trying to hold it all together." Marlene stood up, slow and deliberate. "This is not how you honor someone's memory." I turned toward her. "You didn't honor her. You erased her. You rewrote her exit like it was something convenient. Something shameful. You told people I was the problem so you didn't have to admit you couldn't control her anymore." Her face flushed, but she didn't speak. I looked at Emma. "You asked earlier if I was okay. I wasn't. But I am now. Because I know the truth. And I'm not going to carry their silence anymore." Emma's lips parted like she wanted to say something. Then she nodded. Just once. Small. But it meant everything. Justin cleared his throat from the far end of the table. "She deserves to be heard." Marlene turned toward him sharply, but he didn't flinch. For the first time, her control cracked. She sat down slowly, eyes on her plate, not speaking. No one moved to fill the silence this time. I folded the letter and placed it beside my glass. The candles flickered. The air felt thinner. Realer. I didn't need an apology. Not anymore. I just needed to know I wasn't crazy. And now I did. The sound of the clock above the fireplace felt louder than it should have. No one said much after I sat down again. The kind of quiet that comes not from peace, but from shock, like the silence right after a car crash when everyone's too stunned to move. Marlene didn't say a word. She didn't glare. She didn't argue. She just went back to cutting her pie with the precision of someone slicing through their own discomfort. But her silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. That was the thing about Marlenesh, didn't need to yell to make you feel small. She could weaponize a sigh, lace a prayer with pity, or wield a silent glance like a scalpel. So she said nothing. And the table followed her lead. Sort of. Emma reached over and refilled my water glass. Her hand shook just enough for me to notice. When I looked at her, she gave me a small, apologetic smile. It didn't say everything, but it said enough. Across the table, Justin stood and began collecting empty plates. No one asked him to. He just started doing it, like maybe he didn't know how else to respond to what had just happened. Or maybe it was his way of saying, I hear you, I'm still here. Even Uncle Howard looked different now, less puffed up, more human. He cleared his throat and said something about the football game tomorrow, but no one really answered. We all felt it. Something had broken. Not in a violent way. More like a lock finally cracking open after years of pressure. Marlene rose from her chair, careful and slow. She picked up her wine glass and walked toward the kitchen, not looking at anyone. And just like that, she left the room. Justin came back from the kitchen with a roll of paper towels and handed me one without a word. I hadn't realized I'd been gripping my water glass so hard that it left condensation marks on my palms. Thanks, I said quietly. He nodded, then looked toward the hallway Marlene had disappeared down. I think she thought she was doing what was best, he said. I raised an eyebrow. For who? He didn't answer. Didn't have to. From the far end of the table, Uncle Howard finally spoke. Your mama tried to take you with her, you know. The room went still again. I looked up, slowly. What? He nodded, staring into his empty plate. When she left, she didn't just walk out, she packed a bag for you, too. Vestido. That made something in my stomach twist. She came to me first, he said. Said she needed help leaving. Said she was scared if she took you outright, there'd be trouble. What kind of trouble? He glanced down the hall, as if checking to make sure Marlene wasn't listening. Custody. Cops. Rumors. You know how things work around here. I didn't respond. Because I didn't know. Not any of it. She said she'd write you a letter, Howard added. Said if it all went sideways, she'd at least leave you the truth. And you didn't think to tell me this before now? I asked, my voice low. I figured if you needed to know, Marlene would tell you, he said. She always said she'd handle it. That word again. Handle. I felt like I might scream. Or cry. Or both. Instead, I looked around the room. And that's when I noticed it. A space on the wall where a photo used to hang square outline in the paint, a subtle discoloration where sunlight hadn't faded it evenly. I remembered the photo. Mom and me at the church bake sale. We were both laughing. I had frosting on my nose. Gone. Erased. Did she take it down? I asked softly. Emma followed my eyes. Her mouth opened, then closed. Last year, I think. Said it didn't match the holiday color scheme. Color scheme. Of course. I stood slowly and walked toward the wall. Ran my fingers along the empty space like I was tracing a ghost. That photo didn't disappear by accident. Just like the letter didn't get lost, just like my mother's voice wasn't forgotten. It was removed. Bit by bit. And no one questioned it. Until now. I turned back toward the table. Most eyes were on me again, but not in the same way as before. This time, I didn't feel like a problem. I felt like a reckoning. The kitchen had that late-night quiet that only happens when a house is too full. Voices in the distance, faint laughter trying to take root again in the dining room. But here where the linoleum creaked under your step and the scent of burnt sugar still hung in the air, it was just me, the fridge's low hum, and Justin leaning against the counter. He wasn't holding a plate this time. No wine. Just both hands in his jacket pockets, head tilted like he'd been waiting for me to come find him. "You all right?" he asked. I nodded. More than I was 2 hours ago. That wasn't saying much, but it was honest. He hesitated, glanced toward the hallway. Then said, "There's something I think you should know." My stomach tightened. I hated that sentence anything good ever followed it. "What is it?" He took a breath. "That house. This house. It was supposed to be yours." I blinked. "What are you talking about?" "I mean the deed. Your mom left it to you in her will." I stared at him. "She couldn't legally give it to me. I was 17. "She knew that," he said. "But she added language as age. She wanted the property held in trust until you turned 21. The lawyer that helped her draft it was from Bluefield. I remember, because he showed up at Marlene's one day and everything changed after that." I took a step closer. "You're telling me there was a will, and Marlene challenged it?" He nodded. "Said it was unstable. Said your mom had mental health issues. Got the church board to vouch for her version. Claimed the house needed to stay in the family, meaning her side of it." My jaw locked tight. "And no one told me." He swallowed hard. "I wanted to. But I was 19, working 2 jobs, living out of a friend's garage. And, honestly, I didn't know what was true back then. Marlene said you knew and didn't want it." I let out a bitter laugh. "Of course she did." He took something out of his pocket, an old key. Brass, worn. This was taped under the desk drawer in her office. I saw her move it once and asked what it was. She said it was for emergencies. He held it out. "You might want to check." I took it from him. It felt cold, heavier than it looked. "I should have told you sooner," he said. "You should have," I replied, but my voice was softer than I meant it to be. Because part of me still remembered the way he used to let me ride on the back of his bike when we were kids. The way he brought me root beers during the worst months after Mom left. He wasn't part of the erasure, he was just scared. Like the rest of them. "Do you still have that lawyer's name?" I asked. He nodded. "I can get it. Please do." He looked relieved to have something to offer. A way to help without breaking the whole thing open himself. I turned and looked out the window above the sink. The yard was dark, the porch light still buzzing behind me. Snow flurries drifted past the glass, catching in the floodlight like dust on a film reel. "I always thought it was weird," Justin said behind me. "How Marlene never fully moved in. She kept her bedroom back at her place but made this house look like hers. Like she wanted the shell but not the spirit." I nodded. It wasn't about living in it, it was about owning the story of it. He leaned against the fridge. "You gonna fight it?" I looked down at the key in my palm. "Oh yeah," I said. "I'm not walking out of this house the same way I walked in." And for the first time that night, I meant it. It was after midnight when I slipped into Marlene's office. The house had settled into that late-night silence that only comes after everyone's done pretending to be okay. Dishes were washed, lights were dim. The television in the living room mumbled softly to no one. The carpet muffled my steps as I crossed the room, key in hand. Her office smelled like lemon cleaner and old books. Tidy. Predictable. Just like her. But the energy was off, too still, like the room had been holding its breath for years. I went straight to the desk. Bottom right drawer. The one that always stuck when we were kids. The one she used to snap shut if anyone got too curious. I crouched, found the tiny brass lock, and slipped the key in. It turned easily. That scared me more than if it hadn't. I pulled the drawer open. Inside were 3 neatly labeled folders, a small wooden box, and a manila envelope without a name on it. The first folder held property records. The deed to the house. Bank documents, copies of checks. And, tucked inside, A letter from the Bluefield attorney. Justin mentioned one I recognized because I'd seen my mom's signature at the bottom of the draft. My name was on it too. The second folder was correspondence, church letters, statements from family, friends, 2 printouts of emails claiming my mother was unstable and possibly paranoid. I recognized the tone. Smooth, measured, deceitful in that way only the overly polite can be. I stared at one of the signatures. It was Marlene's. I set it aside. The wooden box was empty, save for a small gold cross necklace tucked in the corner. It wasn't mine, and I was pretty sure it wasn't Mom's either. Another misdirection, maybe. Or a souvenir from a life Marlene pretended to live. But the envelope. That was different. The handwriting wasn't Marlene's and it wasn't mine. It was hers. My mother's. The envelope wasn't sealed. Inside was a folded letter, dated 3 days before she left. I held it like it might fall apart in my hands. I thought I was ready. I wasn't. I sat on the edge of the chair and opened it. Rachel, my heart is tired, but it's not broken. Not because of you. Never because of you. My breath caught in my throat. I'm writing this in case I don't get to say everything I want to your face. If something happens, if they twist things like I'm afraid they will, I need you to know. You were the reason I stayed as long as I did. Your laughter, your questions, your fire. I just didn't want you to burn out trying to fit into this house of silence. Tears blurred the next few lines, but I kept reading. Marlene is going to make herself the hero. She always does. She'll wrap herself in church words and casseroles, but she's afraid of women who don't fold. I let out a shaky breath. If you're holding this, I hope you've found the strength I always saw in you. I hope you know you're allowed to rewrite your part of this story. My fingers clenched around the edges of the letter. It wasn't just the truth. It was a map. A declaration. A woman reclaiming her voice in the only way she could, in paper, in secret, and in faith that maybe one day her daughter would find it. I sat there, letter in hand, surrounded by documents that were never meant to see daylight. A locked drawer full of rewritten history. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't moved, but because something in me had shifted past grief. Past confusion. This wasn't just about memory anymore. It was about justice. I folded the letter gently and slid it into my coat pocket next to the first one. They belonged together now. I stood and looked around the room. The cross. The folders. The cleaner-than-clean desk that had covered up years of betrayal with a single locked drawer. And I wondered how many other women had been edited out of their own stories. How many daughters had to dig through silence just to find their mother's voice. I didn't slam the drawer shut. I eased it closed. But I didn't lock it. It was still dark when I woke up. Or maybe I never really fell asleep. The guest room was quiet, too clean, too curated. It didn't smell like family, it smelled like potpourri and boundaries. Like nothing had ever actually happened in it. I sat up slowly and stared at the chair across the room. My coat hung there, just where I left it. The 2 letters inside felt heavier than any suitcase. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake the silence. I didn't bother turning on a light. I didn't need it. My feet remembered the shape of this house, the dips in the hardwood, the spot by the hallway vent that always whined in winter. I moved through each room like a museum after hours. In the living room, the tree still blinked softly, gold and white lights pulsing like a tired heartbeat. Ornaments arranged just so, Marlene had probably diagrammed the spacing. Under the tree sat one gift with my name on it. I didn't touch it. I didn't need whatever performance was inside that box. Instead, I walked to the shelf near the fireplace. The framed photos lined up like soldiers. Most were new Marlene's grandkids, Howard's fishing trips, a few church events. But one photo was older. A little crooked, probably forgotten. It was me and my mom. We were at the lake. I was maybe 8. She was squinting into the sun, holding up a soggy peanut butter sandwich like it was a trophy. I was laughing. Not posing. Just caught mid-laugh. I picked it up. The back still had her handwriting. Lake Summers, August. You wanted to swim in your church shoes. I smiled, then wiped at my eyes. Just once. I took the photo with me. In the hallway, I paused by the spot where the bake sale picture used to hang, the one Marlene removed for a cleaner look. I reached into my coat pocket and touched both letters. Then I touched that blank space on the wall, just for a moment. In the kitchen, the light above the stove was still on. A coffee pot sat ready to brew, timer blinking 5:47 a.m. I made a note not to unplug it. Small rebellion didn't interest me anymore. I opened the fridge out of habit, saw the same leftovers from last night, and closed it again. I wasn't hungry, but I was ready. Back in the office, I knelt down and opened the drawer again just to prove to myself that it hadn't imagined it all. The folders were still there. The necklace still sat tucked in the wooden box. I lifted it gently. I didn't know whose it was, but I'd bring it to the lawyer Justin mentioned, just in case. Everything else would stay here. I slid the drawer closed and didn't bother locking it. There wasn't much left to protect. In the hallway, I passed my dad's door. Closed, but quiet. I hesitated, letter in hand. I didn't need a confrontation. I just needed him to know I saw him now for everything he was, and wasn't. I found a scrap of paper on the counter and a pen near the sink. I wrote, "Dad, I know you were doing your best. I wish it had looked different. Thank you for not stopping me when it mattered. Rachel." I folded it, left it on the counter next to the pie tin. One last loop through the house. Living room. Hallway. Kitchen. No more wait. Just truth. At the front door, I slipped on my coat. The letters pressed against my ribs. The photo slid into the inside pocket. I turned the deadbolt slowly. The porch light was still on. Snow had dusted the steps in soft white, untouched. It was the kind of morning my mom would have loved, quiet, fresh, waiting. I stepped outside and pulled the door shut behind me. Then, for the first time in 17 years, I locked it. From the outside. Back home in Asheville, the quiet felt different. It wasn't hollow anymore. It was whole. The kind of quiet you earn. I sat at my kitchen table with both letters spread out in front of my mom's, handwriting still soft at the edges, like the paper had soaked up the years. I'd read them a dozen times now, but today was different. Today, I didn't read them to relive. I read them to remember and to release. The sunlight hit the floor just right, casting a warm stripe across the wood grain and my bare feet. My coffee had gone cold, but I didn't mind. Some things didn't need heat to hold value. I picked up the photo from the lake, mom holding that ridiculous sandwich, me mid-laugh, eyes closed and carefree. I'd found a simple wooden frame at a thrift shop down the street. Nothing fancy. Just honest. I placed the photo inside and set it on the shelf above my desk, next to my old sketchbooks and the jar of river stones I used for grounding with my clients. It fit there, like it had always belonged. I turned back to the table and picked up a pen. This letter wasn't to Mom. It wasn't to Marlene or Dad or even Justin. It was to the girl who lived inside me for years, the one who thought her voice was too loud, her memory too flawed, her pain too inconvenient. I didn't start with, "Dear Rachel." I just wrote, "You didn't break her. You didn't drive her away. You were never the reason the house fell quiet. You were the echo left behind when truth walked out the door." My hand trembled, but I kept going. You tried to be small for people who didn't know how to hold something big. And still you stayed kind. You grew into someone who helps others find their voice, even when yours was nearly erased. A breath caught in my throat. Not grief. Not anger. Gratitude. I finished the letter and folded it once. No envelope. No stamp. Just closure. I placed it inside the fireproof box with the other 2 letters, then clicked the latch shut. I didn't need to open it again. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Outside, the wind picked up. Chimes on the porch rattled gently, like a memory I no longer had to chase. In the hallway, my phone buzzed a reminder. New client at 10 a.m. I glanced at the clock. Still time. I moved into the studio, me sacred space. The walls were painted a soft sage green, calming but alive. One window looked out toward the Blue Ridge foothills, where the sky always seemed to lean in just enough to listen. I lit the cedarwood candle on the shelf, turned on the soft white lamp, and laid out fresh paper, a weighted pencil, and the small basket of stone, a smooth, cool grounding. Then I walked to the door and opened it. Fresh air swept in. A woman stood on the steps. Early 40s. Shoulders tense, hands tucked under her arms like she was holding herself together by threads. She gave me a nervous smile. "Rachel?" she asked. I nodded. "You're in the right place." She stepped inside slowly, taking in the space like someone expecting to be judged. I offered her water. She shook her head. We sat across from each other. No desk. No barrier. I spoke gently. "You don't have to start anywhere specific. Just start where it hurts." Her lips parted, then closed, then parted again. She whispered, "I don't know who I am without the silence." And for a second, I felt it again. That girl in me. The one who lived in silence. I met the woman's eyes. Steady, soft. "You don't have to stay there," I said. And we began.